Hi again everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video we'll be focusing on the reproduction in vertebrates. So if you're new to this channel, we have a couple of videos that we've made and you can access them in my description box and it should appear on the top hand right of this video. Now in the previous video we went through meiosis, described meiosis and the different phases of meiosis. We went through all of those phases and we looked at genetic variation, which is introduced through random segregation in the metaphase and the crossing over during the prophase 1. Okay, if you really do remember, we said that we are going to make a separate video on the consequences of abnormal meiosis and the similarities and differences between mitosis and meiosis. So that video should be the next video. Okay, so I know that I said it should have followed the previous video, but due to requests, guys, I had to do the reproduction in vertebrates part, and because it's pretty short and really simple, it won't take too long. Okay, so let's just go through it, and after that we'll go into the video of abnormal meiosis. Okay, right, so looking at vertebrates, so vertebrates are simply animals that have a backbone. So they are born having a backbone. So that's what separates them from other types of living things, okay, organisms. Right. So I just want us to first focus on fertilization because it's pretty important here when we are looking at different types of reproductive strategies. So fertilization, I know that we haven't gone through human reproduction, but we will start with reproduction in vertebrates and it will make sense as we go on, right? So in the previous video, we said that we have what we call sex cells, which in scientific terms are gametes, okay? So gametes are sex cells, so that includes sperm cells and egg cells. And we said that these are produced during the cell division of meiosis. So during meiosis, we produce sperm cells, we produce egg cells. Okay, so sperm cells in the testicles in males and egg cells in the ovaries in females, right? So now what happens is that when these two fuse together, so when the sperm cell and the egg cell, which are haploid, okay, so the N really represents that they are haploid, okay, or they have half the normal number of chromosomes that you find in a somatic or body cell, in a somatic cell of a human being. Okay, so the N represents that these are haploid. Okay, so gametes are always going to be haploid. Okay, so when these two fuse together, so you have a sperm cell. So this is the sperm cell, right? We'll look at the structure of the sperm cell in the next videos in human reproduction. So this is sperm cell, and inside the sperm cell we have the nucleus, which has this genetic material inside of it, and on the right hand side we have the egg cell. Okay, so the egg cell, the ova or the ovum, has a nucleus as well, right? So this is the nucleus, this is where it is situated. And so during fertilization, these two nucleuses, okay, they fuse together, right? So knowing that they are haploid, they are both haploid. So this in humans, this egg cell has 23 chromosomes, okay, and the sperm cell has also 23 chromosomes. That's half the number of the somatic or body cells, right? So this is 23 and 23, and so when they combine together, when they fuse together, they end up producing a structure that we call a zygote. Okay, so zygote forms as a result of the fusion of the nuclei between the sperm cell and the egg cell. So then we produce this zygote, and hence, because you have 23 chromosomes from the egg cell and 23 chromosomes from the sperm cell, now you have a sum or a total of 46 chromosomes. Okay, so now we also say that this zygote, we allocate the 2n to represent that it is diploid, right? Okay, so haploid gametes fuse together, their nuclei fuse together, and they result in this structure that we call a zygote, which is diploid, okay, or has 46 number of chromosomes, okay, and then this will develop further and further into an embryo. Okay, we'll take a look at that. We'll go into detail in the human reproduction topic, right? So we're saying that fertilization is simply the fusion, okay, of the sperm cell nucleus and the egg cell nucleus to form a zygote. Okay, so this is the simple definition of fertilization. As simple as that, right? So these two have to fuse together, they form a zygote, which then develops into an embryo, which then develops into an offspring. Okay, so a full organism, right? So now vertebrates have different or perform fertilization in different ways. Okay, so we will take a look at that. That's what we mean by by reproductive strategies. So we're looking at the diversity, at the different types of reproductive strategies. How do different organisms fertilize? Okay, so that's very important in this topic of reproduction in vertebrates. You have to know the definitions, you have to know the different types of reproductive strategies, okay? And so that's why I started here, because this serves as a foundation of course of reproductive strategies, right? So we have different types of fertilization. So fertilization does not only occur inside a female body, as we know. Okay, so as humans, we do know that this whole process actually occurs inside a female um, body. Okay, so in the fallopian tubes. So in this case, it does not represent all organisms. So some organisms have fertilization occurring outside of the female body, and some occurring inside of the female body, like us. Okay, so like us, so some, for an example, some organisms such as your fish, they have uh, they have a reproductive strategy that we call the external fertilization. Okay, so external means outside, right? So it means outside. So it's like extra. When you say extra, really means outside. So, but outside of what? So outside of the female body, right? So external fertilization is simply fertilization that takes place outside the female's body. Okay, so that what we mean is that you may have fish. Okay, so I'm just going to try to draw. So a male fish, okay, it will produce its sperm cells. So it will produce its sperm cells. Okay, we are in the ocean. Okay, and then you also have a female fish. Okay, which will also do the same, but of course it will produce egg cells. Okay, so it will produce egg cells in the water, so it's outside of this female organism, so outside of the body of the female organism. And so now what will happen is that these sperm cells will fuse. Okay, so their nuclei will fuse with the egg cells of this female body, okay, and form, of course, the zygote, right? So the most important thing is that this whole process, the fertilization part, occurs outside the female body, okay, and this is what we call external fertilization, guys, right? You cannot get this wrong, right? So now, because this is the ocean, and the ocean has many organisms that live in it and has many predators, okay, that can consume these gametes, okay, or developing embryos, so on and so on. There have to be measures to try and maximize the chances of fertilization, right? So these two organisms, they are trying to ensure that their generation, there's a next generation that's going to survive. And so the way that they do that to ensure that they survive is that they produce many gametes. Okay, so they produce, so the male will produce many sperm cells, the female will produce many egg cells. Okay, it's going to be many of them um, than relatively what we know of. Okay, so many egg cells and sperm cells are produced to maximize. So the reason of that is to maximize the chances of fertilization, because if there are many sperm cells and egg cells, many might not fuse, but um, you will have some of them that will indeed fuse together and result in developing embryos. Okay, so that of course will prevent extinction and will help with the continuance of this species, right? So the way that the strategy that they use to maximize the chances of fertilization is that they release many gametes, okay, egg cells and sperm cells. Okay, so this is a strategy really to maximize the chances of fertilization to ensure the survival of the species, right? So that is very important, guys. You have to know that. And this is not happening on land, right? This is happening underwater. Okay, so it's happening in a water body. Can be the ocean, can be a river, can be a lake, so on and so on. But it has to be there has to be a water medium. So this is to prevent drying off. Okay, and it also helps with mobility. So mobility will mean movement. Okay, remember, sperm cells have to move, egg cells have to be able to move in order to fuse with the so sperm cells have to be able to move and egg cells have to be able to move in order to fuse together, right? So the water currents and so on and so on. So this help with these. So these help increase the chances of fertilization, the movement. Okay, so that fertilization does occur, and of course it prevents them from drying off because they are in a water body, right? So guys, it's very important that you know all of this information. Okay, right. Let's move on then. So that is external fertilization. And then internal fertilization, as the word suggests, internal inside. Okay, so this is the type of fertilization that takes place inside the female body. Okay, or inside the female's body. Right? So in this case, of course, this is we are the perfect example of this. Okay, I won't even go too far. So we know that fertilization in humans occurs inside a female body, and that is what we call internal fertilization, right? So external fertilization, you should think fish, right? Internal fertilization, you should think human, right? So it's pretty easy to differentiate between those two guys, right? Okay, and of course, because this is actually occurring inside the female's body, there are relatively fewer egg cells and sperm cells that are produced. So there's relatively fewer gametes that are produced. Okay, because inside the female's body you will not have currents, water currents, you will not have predators, so on and so on. Okay, so it's pretty much protected from the outside environment. Okay, so and hence they do not have to produce a lot of gametes in order to increase the chances of fertilization like the fish do. Okay, right. So the take home point here is that you guys should be able to differentiate between external and internal fertilization, right? And you should be able to know which or what strategies do these use in order to improve or to maximize the chances of fertilization, right? So we move on from there. Okay, so we move on from there into this. Okay, so we move on into the different types of the different types of reproductive strategies. Okay, we even have more. Okay, so we look at this one really does have students having problems understanding it. So we are going to spend a bit of time, but not a lot. I'll give you a clue in order to be able to differentiate between these. So these are the Ovipary, Ovovivipary, and Vivipary. Okay, so the pronunciation really doesn't matter. Okay, but what's important here, guys? Okay, these are three different reproductive strategies. Okay, Ovipary, Ovovivipary, and Vivipary. So now, Ovipary, these are organisms in which the embryo develops in an egg but outside the female's body. Okay, so the embryo is actually developing in an egg, but it's actually outside of the female's body, right? So, what organism do we know of that practices this reproductive strategy? Of course, these are chickens, right? So, chickens, you'll find out that they produce eggs which within which have embryos within them, which of course will end up being um, chickens, right? So will end up being full-grown chickens, but these are actually growing, or this egg is actually growing, or it's actually outside the female's body, right? And so this strategy is what we call ovipar. So we also say that these are oviparous organisms. Okay, so some birds, a lot of birds really practice these reproductive strategy. Okay, so call them oviparous organisms. Okay, and the next reproductive strategy is called ovovivipary. Okay, ovovivipary. I mean, so ovovivipary. Here you have organisms that practice this strategy in which the egg is retained or is actually inside the female's body. So the embryo actually grows inside an egg, but the egg is inside the female's body. Okay, and the young is born live. Okay, so it's born. So the egg actually hatches inside the female's body. Okay, when it comes to ovipary, the egg actually hatches outside the female's body. Right. So for an example of this is like some snakes. So some snakes really practice this ovovivipary reproductive strategy. Now, what do we see that is similar between these two? Okay, both of these have an O at the start, and an O, the letter O represents what? Okay, looks like what? Looks like this. Looks like an egg. Okay, and both of these actually have their embryos growing inside eggs. Okay, but the major difference is that the ovipary organisms, they have their eggs growing outside of the female's body, and then the ovovivipary or ovoviviparous organisms have their embryos or their eggs actually growing inside the female's body. Okay, so you can think of this maybe a clue could be ovovivipary. That's a pretty long term, and because a pretty long term, you can really think of a snake. So a snake, I mean, they have different lengths, but when you think of a snake, you really think of an animal that has a length. Okay, so a particular length. So because this word is pretty long, this actually resembles a snake. Okay, so long ovovivipary, that's snake. Okay, so this is, I mean, there's many examples of these. You have some reptiles, many reptiles, um, so on and so on. But what's important, guys, is that you remember all of these. So ovovivipary, you think of a snake, and some snakes actually have eggs growing inside of them and have them hatching, where they will result in the young being born inside the female brood, right? But what is common or similar is the O, that is at the letter O that is at the beginning of each word, and the letter O represents the egg. Okay, so both of these have embryos growing inside of an egg, but the oviparous organisms have eggs. Actually, these eggs are actually outside the female's body, and the ovoviviparous animals have eggs actually growing inside the female's body. Okay, I hope that really helped. Okay, so and then the last reproductive strategy is maybe not the last, but the next is the viviparous animals or organisms. So vivipary, these are us. So this is humans, a good example. So they have internal fertilization that takes place, and the fertilized egg does not grow inside of an egg, but it actually develops, and it is directly connected to the mother as it receives nutrients through a placenta. Now that is viviparous organisms. Most of these are mammals, okay, but I'm just going to make an example of humans, right? So it's very important that you differentiate between these three guys. These two that start with an O, they have their embryos growing inside of an egg. And then the viviparous organisms, their embryos are actually connected to the mother, directly connected to the mother. They are not growing inside of an egg, okay? They receive nutrients through a placenta, while these receive their nutrients from the egg itself, right? Oviparous having eggs growing outside the female's body, and ovoviviparous, their eggs are actually stored or are actually end up hatching inside the female's body. Okay, so it's very important again, guys, that you are able to differentiate between these three types of reproductive strategies. Okay, so for these, the oviparous organisms and ovoviviparous organisms, they have an egg, right? So they have embryos growing inside of an egg, and this egg is what we call the amniotic egg. Okay, so of course you can imagine an embryo, if it is growing, it needs nutrients, it needs to be protected, and so this amniotic egg serves that serves all of those functions, right? So as you can see here, we have a diagram. I got this diagram from the Western Cape Education Department, so you can get that from that site. And this is, of course, a type of egg that is produced by reptiles, birds, and it has extra embryonic membranes. So these membranes actually provide all of these functions that are required by a developing embryo. So extra actually means outside. Okay, so these are actually um, structures that are not part of the embryo, but actually serve the embryo. Okay, I hope you get me there. Right, so let's take a look at the outside. So as you can see, you have the outside part, which is the shell. Okay, of course the shell provides a protective function, okay, from protects the embryo from extreme weather, from predators, okay, so on and so on, right? So the shell is the outermost layer that we have there, and inside you have this embryo right here that we call the chorion. Okay, so the chorion is also actually called the outermost layer, right? The chorion. And what it does actually, it allows gases to allows oxygen to be absorbed in. Remember, the embryo requires oxygen, okay, to be absorbed in, and takes out the carbon dioxide, which is waste. Okay, so that is the function that is served by the chorion. Okay, so the chorion allows oxygen, which enters through the shell, to pass through to the embryo, and carbon dioxide to pass from the embryo through the shell to the air outside. So it serves a gaseous exchange function, okay, the chorion. Okay, so this is the chorion, the dark layer that we have there. Okay, so that's what we call the chorion. It's also called um, the outermost layer. Okay, so which is responsible for gaseous exchange. And if you look closely here, we also have um, a layer right here that directly surrounds the embryo. So this is the embryo right here, and you have another layer that is actually surrounding the embryo, and that layer we call that the amnion. Okay, so what it does is that it encloses an amniotic cavity, or this hole that is inside here. It encloses it, and this is actually containing amniotic fluid. Okay, so we're saying that this innermost layer, which is the amnion, has a fluid inside of it, which we call the amniotic fluid. Okay, and what is the function of the amniotic fluid? It is to cushion the embryo against mechanical shock. Okay, remember, an egg is not going to stay in one position all the time. It's going to roll, it's going to move, and so while that happens, this fluid that is inside the amnion actually protects the embryo, prevents the embryo from injury. Okay, so it absorbs that mechanical shock. Okay, and the second function that it performs is that it prevents dehydration of the embryo. Okay, so embryo requires to be hydrated all of the time. So that amniotic fluid that we have there inside of the amnion provides these two functions, critical functions, right? Okay, what else do we have inside here? So inside the chorion, we also have this structure right here. So as you can see, this structure, okay, so this structure is a sac. Okay, so it's like bag-like. It's actually what we call the yolk cell sac. Okay, so a yolk sac, this is a sac that actually contains yolk. Okay, so yolk basically is food for the embryo. Okay, so it has all the necessary nutrients that the embryo requires to develop into a fully developed organism. Okay, so the yolk sac provides nutrients, or has yolk that provides nutrients to the embryo, like that. Okay, so that's the function of the yolk sac. And lastly, we have another bag-like structure that we call the allantois. Okay, you can call it allantois or whatsoever. Again, the pronunciation doesn't matter. I will just call it the allantois. So the allantois, what it does is that it stores waste. Okay, remember the embryo is consuming food, and so it will need to, okay, it will need to produce waste, and so this waste goes into the allantois. Okay, so allantois stores the waste that is produced by the embryo. Okay, so that's the basic function of the allantois, right? So it's very important that you are able to identify all these different types of structures or extra embryonic membranes in an amniotic egg, and you are able to describe their functions, different types of functions. Okay, right. And lastly, so let's just wrap this up. We'll wrap this up with an activity, but let's just look at the the last reproductive strategies that we have. So we have what we call parental care, right? So sorry about that. Okay, let's do that again. Right. So parental care is really simple. So as you can see, it's a behavioral pattern that organisms start to implement when they have offspring. So it's a behavioral pattern where parents spend time and energy on the feeding and protection of their offspring. I mean, not all organisms do this or practice parental care. Some do not have or do not implement parental care, but some of these organisms actually do implement this. So this is a type of pattern that they that they implement, whereby they bring food to the offspring, they protect the offspring from predators, they teach the offspring. Okay, so it's really about grooming the offspring, trying to ensure that it learns. Okay, so you're teaching the offspring to survive in that particular environment. Okay, so and so you do certain things or certain behaviors or implement certain behaviors to ensure that it is safe, that it survives, that it learns its environment, it learns how to survive. So that is what we call parental care. It's as easy as that. And there's different types of development, because offspring do not develop the same. Some actually develop knowing how to do everything. Okay, so they are they are born unconsciously or just knowing how to survive, what to do. They do not need parental care. So that's what we call precocial development. So they are pre-developed. Okay, precocial development. They are born knowing everything. So this is a type of development in some animals where, for an example, where birds, the hatchlings' eyes are actually open. They are born having their eyes open, and their bodies are actually covered with feathers, and they're actually able to hunt for their food. Okay, so they are born knowing how to fly, so on and so on. So that's what we call precocial development, guys, right? So, and it's actually the opposite of altricial development, because altricial development, it's where you have the young, they are not fully developed, they cannot move around, they really require parental care like humans. Okay, so we know that babies, they are born very vulnerable. They are not aware of their surroundings, their environment. They are not fully developed. They need attention. They need teachings. They need care. Okay, and so that is what we call altricial development. This is a type of development in animals where the young are actually not fully developed and cannot do everything by themselves. They cannot feed themselves. They need parents to be there, okay, in order to do all of those. Okay, so these, you just need to know the difference between them. Okay, you need to identify. Okay, whenever you are given an activity or an exam, you need to be able to identify which organism implements or practices precocial development and which one practices altricial development. Okay, so in altricial development, indeed, we do need parental care. Those organisms do practice parental care, the parents, and in precocial development, you don't need parental care, okay, because the young are born aware of their environment. They know how to survive already. Okay, they know how to hunt food. Okay, they know how to protect themselves from predators, so on and so on. Okay, right. So let's then take a look at some of the activities that I've compiled. So I have compiled 3 activities here. Okay, so that's activity 1, this is the second activity, and this is the third activity, right? So these should test out to ensure that we have achieved our objectives, which are, of course, looking at the concepts, the different types of concepts, which is knowing the difference between external and internal fertilization. Okay, looking at the different types of reproductive strategies, the amniotic egg, okay, precocial and altricial development, and also parental care. So when it comes to reproduction in vertebrates, it's really about definitions and also knowing how to annotate and know the functions of the different types of extra embryonic membranes that you get in an amniotic egg, right? So let's take a look at these then. Right, so in question 1, we are provided with a table, and this says the table below shows a comparison of the composition of the amniotic egg in 3 different bird species. Okay, so this is the composition of the amniotic egg, okay, in different types of bird species, right? Right, so from the start we can definitely see that the composition, of course, made up of your yolk. So we're given an amount of yolk in 3 particular bird species. So as you can see that it differs. So bird species 1 has 17% of the yolk, 77% of water content, and 1.04 kilocalories per gram of energy. Okay, so that's what we see for bird species 1. Bird species 2 has quite a higher percentage of yolk, and quite, as you can see, bigger water content, and even bigger energy. So that species 2 really has more, or basically serves more nutrition to the developing embryo. And then bird species 3, I would say, is relatively in the, it's higher, has a higher composition of these 3 elements than bird species 1. Okay, relative. Right, so question 1.1, let's start off with the first question, which says that define Ovovivipary. Okay, so we've went through Ovovivipary, guys, and we basically said that these are organisms that have eggs, or females have eggs. So we're saying that, okay, the developing embryo is inside, or let's say it develops. Okay, let me rather use that. Okay, so it develops inside, inside an egg, but that egg is inside the female's body. Okay, which develops, which is found, or we can say that, which is found inside the female body, okay, during gestation. Now, for those of you who don't know gestation, guys, that is the pregnancy period, right? So that is pregnancy, basically. Okay, so during gestation, right? So during all that period, the embryo is inside an egg, that is inside the female body, right? So that is what the ovovivipary reproductive strategy is. And then 1.2 says, which one of the bird species, 1, 2, or 3, most probably shows a precocial development reproductive strategy? Okay, so which one of these most probably shows a precocial development reproductive strategy? Now, if you think about this, a precocial development means that the developing embryo, okay, so when the bird species has given birth, it will give birth to a fully grown or fully developed bird that is able to move around, that is able, or that has its eyes wide open, that is able to feed on itself, that is able to hunt on itself. So it's independent of the parents. It doesn't require parental care. Now, in order for a bird species to give birth to a fully developed offspring, then that particular egg, or that particular amniotic egg, had to have a higher composition of yolk, higher water content, higher energy, because that would have meant that it had consumed a lot of these, such that it was able to grow to its fully development state. Okay, I don't know if you guys hear me on that one. Okay, so as you can see, guys, bird species 2 has very high composition of yolk, water content, and energy. So as you can see, that bird species 2 has to have been born having been fully developed. Okay, and so that's what we are going with. So we're going with bird species 2, okay, because it has a higher composition of these, then it has to have been, by the time of birth, it has to have been fully grown, okay, because it had all the necessary nutrients it requires, all the water content it needs. So these nutrients are responsible for it growing and fully developing. Okay, so we are going with bird species 2, right? Bird species, I'm sorry about that. Bird species, bird. Okay, so 1.3. 1.3 says explain your answer to question 1.2. Okay, so saying that due to the relatively high composition, okay, of yolk, water content, and energy that was spent, and energy, right? So the developing embryo will be born with, or will be born fully developed, as it had all the necessary nutrients it requires, or excessive. Um, okay, so fully developed, that means that um, it will be born with eyes wide open, okay, feeding on its own, okay, and so on, right? So it will be fully developed by the time it is born. Okay, so that's our reason there, guys. I hope you do get what we have stated there in 1.3. Then 1.4 says which one of the bird species 1, 2, or 3 will possibly produce offspring requiring the highest degree of parental care. So in this case, an offspring will be fully dependent on the parents, will be born having its eyes closed, really dependent on the parents to feed it, dependent on the parents to protect it, okay, unaware of its surroundings, so on and so on. So very much dependent on the parents. Okay, so like human beings, right? So that's artificial development. So which one of these? So this one, it has to be the one that has the lowest percentage of yolk, water content, and energy. Okay, so it has to be bird species 1. Okay, so because of course, if it has the lowest percentage of yolk, water content, and energy, by the time it's born, it will not be fully developed. I don't know why I keep on saying bird species. So that's bird species 1, right? And if there is, we would have given the reason, of course, if we were asked. So head on to the next question, question 2. So we see a diagram right over here. So what does the statement say? So study the diagram of 1-day-old hatchlings, A and B, below. Okay, so we have a hatchling on A, we have hatchling B. So the diagram is not drawn to scale. Okay, so there we go. As you can see, we have an eggshell, we have an hatchling A, and hatchling A, from the start, as you can see, guys, it has its eyes closed. Looks like it's very vulnerable. It's not, does not have feathers. It is not aware of its surroundings, and it's fully dependent on its parents, okay, for guidance, for teachings, for feeding, for survival. And then that contrasts hatchling bee. As you can see, it has feathers, it has its eyes wide open, it is fully developed. Okay, so as you can see right over there, right? So 2.1 says state two visible features in hatchling egg which indicate altricial development. Okay, so first of all, guys, it is born with eyes closed. Okay, so as you can see, the eyes are closed. Okay, and the second thing, okay, is that it has no feathers. Okay, so it requires the mother and the father to basically keep it warm. Okay, has no feathers. No feathers. Sorry about this. Feathers. Okay, let's move on to the next one then. Second question is 2.2, and it says the diagram represents ovipary. Okay, yes, indeed, guys, it does, because we don't see these eggs having grown inside the female's body that would have been ovovivipary. So this implies that these eggs actually grew outside the female's body. So explain one possible advantage of vivipary when compared to ovipary. Well, viviparous organisms have their embryos growing inside the female's body, and hence that one advantage is that this protects them. So having, okay, so let's say having the embryo growing inside the mother's body provides better protection from predators. Okay, because when it comes to oviparous animals, that egg can be is vulnerable. It's outside the female's body. It can break. It can be eaten by predators. Okay, so it's very much more vulnerable. Okay, compared to viviparous animals, which of course, which in which the female grows and in which the embryo grows inside the female's body. And then 2.3 says, explain why you would expect that the yolk content of the egg hatchling B was more than that of hatchling A. So this is like the same question as that one. Hatchling B has fully developed, okay, and so this implies that it had more than enough yolk. Okay, so it had excessive or more than enough nutrients to grow to its full size. Okay, its full size, right? So that's our reason there, right? So it must have had many a lot of nutrients, or a lot of yolk. Let's head on to the next question. So we are represented with diagrams in this one. We have diagram one, in which we have the two fish. So you have female fish and a male fish, and it looks like that if you look closely, so it looks like they are releasing gametes. Okay, so the male fish will be releasing sperm cells, and the female fish releases egg cells, and fertilization will occur in or outside, rather outside the female's body, right? Which is what we call external fertilization, right? And then in diagram two, we have a bird here, and that this is an oviparous animal. Of course, as you can see, this you have eggs growing outside the female's body. And then diagram three, we have a cow, and this is a vivipary reproductive strategy. right? Okay, so the question says, okay, so which diagram or diagrams, 1, 2, or 3, represents organisms? Okay, so A says where external fertilization takes place. Okay, where external fertilization takes place. So that would be diagram 1, right? So that is external fertilization, right? As you can see that these fish release their gametes outside of their bodies, and particularly outside the females. The fertilization will happen outside the female's body, right? So that will be diagram 1 for A. And then for B, B says where extra embryonic membranes develop to assist with the protection and nutrition of the embryo. Okay, so extra embryonic membranes, so that would be diagram 2, right? Okay, so diagram 2, that is the amniotic egg that we have there, right? So that is diagram 2. And then C says um, which is or are oviparous. So oviparous, that will be diagram 2. Right? So that is oviparous. So it will have eggs growing outside the, actually diagram 1 and 2, I think. Okay. Oh yeah, it's diagram 2, guys. It should be diagram 2, right? Then 1.2 says name the type of egg that egg produced by the organism represented in diagram 2. So what type of egg is that? That is, so that's 4.2. This should have been 4.1. Sorry about that. So in that for 4.2, that will be an amniotic egg. Okay, so we call that the amniotic egg, guys, right? So that's it for this video, guys. It's as simple as this. It really doesn't take a lot. It's not a lot of concepts. So if you can just hold on to those concepts and try to remember them, be able to differentiate between those terms, especially the oviparous or the viviparous and viviparous organisms. And external fertilization, internal fertilization, know the amniotic egg, know how to annotate it, know the functions of each extra embryonic membrane, and know the parental care and the types of development. And that's it. And you have mastered, if you master that, then you have mastered the reproduction in vertebrates part, right? So guys, I'll see you in the next video, and hopefully you have gained a lot from this video. Bye.